Vice Chair, whenever you're ready.
Oh, sweet, for six. And for the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, we have planned for 5 minutes. Forward on that one. Okay. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Planning Commission, Steve Toskey, Citizens St. Helens. I want to thank you all for continuing to move forward in your important and vital mission of protecting the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens. And to continue forward in a proactive manner. I saw there's a proactive item on our calendar. The planning and the future of this city needs to come from people like you and other citizens that are volunteering their time. What is our city going to look like in the long run? How do we make it more prosperous? Right now, we have a city that we spend $5.4 million on police, double the amount of the county. At the same time, we have well below average income of people who live here. And what we have built recently has been a lot of opportunity housing, I would say, for folks that are less fortunate. So I'm saying stay the course. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to continue to be a very, very loud voice, and increasingly loud voice in this city. And I'm encouraging you to continue on in your role. I read the outline of some of the state laws on the architectural standards. I think it's very important that you as the Planning Commission move forward with this. I don't see any risk at all with architectural standards in any way impeding the production of housing. As a matter of fact, I see architectural standards as encouraging the production of housing. And I'm happy to go in and study that if you need to study it. Because if you end up building a lot of housing for one end of the sector, we have overbuilt, right? That by any standard, St. Helens is sitting way above its weight on housing for affordable housing. And so if you continue to build in that standard, what will occur is people aren't going to want to build housing of higher standard housing, because you need a balance, right? Who is going to buy the higher standard type housing? You need to have somebody be able to be wanting to write a check and live here, bring their family here. And the most successful communities are communities that have a plurality of people. And so I'm thinking that we should encourage everyone to come to St. Helens. Everyone has an opportunity. So on the architectural standards, the kinds of things that I was thinking about when I was on the Planning Commission are more design stuff, not necessarily structural things. And having been through a remodel myself, the additional costs of making housing look like, for example, my house looks, I put my money where my mouth is, but the difference in the amount of money that I spent on siding, I put siding on the house. The extra money to do the extras in the grand scheme of things wasn't that much. So I would not be overly concerned with developing standards that are going to unreasonably discourage people to build here. Move forward with our vision, trying to make this place better than it is now. And it's a great place to live. So I want to thank you all and thank you very much for your time. and let you know that I'm keeping an eye out and I'm rooting for all of you, and thank you very much.
Anything else? Topic is not on the agenda. 5 minutes.
So, I think there are two proactive things that I would like to add to your list. The first one is the plaza, which I think is an excellent job for this committee. The plaza gets, upwards of 50,000 visitors every Halloween town, and something needs to be done with it. And whether it's bricks or astroturf or whatever, I don't know where else that would happen from this committee, and it would be really nice to see if this committee would add that to one of your proactive items, is to have a solution for that. For what we do with the plaza and how it could be remodeled or improved to make it so that it can have all the visitors that we get without being a mud bath. Last year was actually not that bad because we didn't get much rain, but the year before that, it was a mud bath. And we can't count on it, and Halloween Town's not going away. It's something that does need to change. And the other thing that I'd like to see you do is, which is probably more difficult, is to set some standards on our ordinances on how we eliminate places like the Fat Boy Pizza, which is really storage, residential, and commercial, and it shouldn't be. And I don't know if that means writing new ordinances, or if it means, having a fine or penalty system. I don't know what that proactive item is, but we need that space. Frankly, our town's growing, and I think it's going to continue to grow. And we can't have, not only is it not attractive, but we need the space. And I would like to see this committee work on making the necessary changes in ordinances so that that can be allowed to happen. Thank you.
Any comments on the minutes from last month? Oh, I'm sorry. There's someone on
I didn't hear from them.
Zoom. Okay.
Thank you, Russ.
Thank you. Minutes from last month. There have the comments on there. Corrections. Not, we have
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Take a step back to the item before that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You want to go right over that one?
You do the next thing and I just. Chair and vice chair selection. Here, actually. Everybody did.
I would just like to, just as an idea, to have you finish out this time. Because we're mid-year, and have Jennifer. Try out vice chair. To kind of learn what it's about. 'Cause we're in July already, and so, I mean, normally we pick every January. And so I thought if you just did this year rather than trying to stir the pot too much.
I took on vice chair 2 years after I started.
Yeah, as you know, you may recall that I wasn't in favor of having a brand new person be chair, so.
Well, that's why it's not a vice chair, and you are kind of, and then other committees I've been involved in. You were vice chair for a term or two, and then you step into the other role. And then, because you have current and past, that kind of thing. And that way you have kind of a learning, maybe you get to do it once before the end of the year. And then you're like, oh, I don't want any of that, or you're like, that's not so bad.
I honestly don't have any interest in being chair. So if it's training for chair, probably not the.
I just thought then by the time the year's out,
I'm willing.
other people would be more seasoned.
Be vice chair till the end of the year.
You might have to run a meeting sometime. On the bill.
Right, can we make that a motion then? That, Dan will finish out the year and Jennifer's willing to do vice chair until the end of the year.
Well, second.
In the year, we'll make another.
Then we'll decide at the end of the year based on how.
Like
much
we always
us
do.
to- Just to get us back on track.
Anyone else interested? Russ is. Charlie? Okay, I'm just curious. All right.
Meat nuts. Not raising your hand.
Give me a year or two.
So do we have a motion?
I made the motion.
Do you have a second? You know, seconded, put all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You get volunteer.
All right,
Don't you dare miss a meeting in November, you'll be up here in January.
there you go.
Nicely done.
Yeah, put- I gotta be sure.
Thanks.
All right, now in my actual official role, wait, no. The hearing. Over the hearing. Now, we started?
Yeah.
It's now 6:11 p.m. The public hearing is now open. This is a quasi judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for a conditional use permit. The subject property is identified on the county assessor's map as lot 100 on map 4N1 988. The applicant is C4 LLP. The owner is the same. Because quasi judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we will take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte contact, conflict of interest, or bias in this matter? Does anyone from the audience object to the ability of the commissioner to make a very? Fine. Okay, generally the order of proceedings will be as follows: required statements, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberations and decision. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the city code and whereas 197.7635. The following is a list of applicable substantive criteria for this decision. St. Albans Municipal Code 17.100.0401A2F. All testimony, argument, and the evidence must be directed toward the applicable substantive criteria as described or other criteria in the plan, such as the comprehensive plan or land use regulation, such as that found in the development code, which the person believes applies to the decision. Those who raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing in person or in writing, or ability to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to the land use board of appeal. And on that issue, it precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Staff, yeah, report.
I do, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the old Ralph's site, 1955 Old Portland Road. A little bit of history there. It was a vacant site until the early 90s, when a wrecking yard was established. Based on, some of the things I've seen in the records, it was established before the permits, and so it was kind of an old enforcement case, but they got it all worked out. The original land use approval was 93, a couple modifications are in the early 2000s, and then it ceased around 2010. It's been kind of vacant since, and really hasn't been much activity. I know whoever owned it, the family, they put it up for sale several times over the years. We'd answered a lot of questions on it. And because we've been answering questions on it, it's kind of been on the radar. Someone finally bought it, started doing some things, and the county actually contacted us, say, hey, they're pulling an electrical permit. And so, thank God we have good coordination with the county. So that was kind of the initiation for me to contact them, tell them what was up, which leads us to this process here. So that's the brief history. It's zoned heavy industrial. They want to do a storage use, and storage use is a business venture, not as related to a business. For example, let's say it was Home Depot and they were storing. Extra merchandise out there, that would be storage related to a business, not as a business venture itself. As a business venture, requires the conditional use permit. That's why we're here. And it's zoned heavy industrial. There's actually some light industrial in that area. And this is becoming, this little stretch of Old Portland Road is becoming a storage city. But it's no surprise because there is sewer available, but water's kind of far away. The metal workers, the Curvin metal workers, they had to put in a well due to the distance of water. So that's kind of a limitation. Landscaping, all that stuff. Having looked at several properties along this stretch, Old Portland Road is actually skewed to one side. Speaking of the Curvin metal workers, our original decision for that one included frontage improvements. But once we looked into how far skewed it was, and if they constructed that, the road would be out of alignment with the rest of it. You'd have to reconstruct a significant portion of it. It's like, oh, this doesn't make sense now. So the reason I bring that up is not because this proposal warrants those improvements. It's a diminutive proposal, not a lot of capital involved in it, as far as I know, at least. And so it would be inappropriate from a proportionality standpoint to require those improvements. But there's a whole lot of street frontage, and when we talk about street frontage, we talk about street trees. And in this segment, we consider those trees part of the frontage improvements, which are impractical at this time. But there are some trees along Old Portland Road. I had a conversation with Vladimir, the owner, and he says that they shouldn't cause a problem for his operation generally, and should be able to stay. In the heavy industrial zone, there's not a minimum percent landscaping like some of our zoning districts, like I'll have 10% landscaping. So there's not a area requirement. Really, it's based on performance needs. In this case, it's screening. As a wrecking yard, it was supposed to be screened. So there is a mostly intact fence. Some of it has fell apart and he's had to replace it because of some theft issues, which, you know, speaking with people in this area over the years continues to be a problem, but not surprising. It's dark. You have a lot of woods nearby, and there's it just aids in the opportunity for nefarious actions. So that's good. The fence is in place. There's some of the replaced segments do need to be site obscuring, and so you'll see that as a condition. Surface type. Generally for open storage yards, we've been okay with gravel. The one thing that I'm asking for some of your help on in this case is, so for open storage, we've been pretty consistent to allow a non-paved surface. As long as the non-paved surface isn't adjacent to the road, which it's not in this case, the area outside the fence accessing Old Portland Road is paved already. But when it becomes a mini storage site, which isn't proposed, but there's a little bit of that potentially in here. We have required that paving. So it's not proposed, and they're not proposing a lot of buildings, but if you look at that northern area, so that's the subject property. In the northern corner there, you'll see that it's a smaller area that's kind of fenced off, and the applicant has already placed two Connex boxes in there. He will need building permits for those. And so there's a question of, well, in the smaller area, there's a little bit of improvement. There's a more specific area where people may travel. And so should that be paved or not? And then there's also a condition about not partitioning the buildings off, which Vladimir said he didn't propose. Really, those buildings are to help secure smaller items like forklifts and stuff like that, is how he described it. So that's one of the things, partitioning of the buildings would require building permits anyways. I confirmed that with our building official today. There are some buildings on the property, not many. We did some research into that. There was a permit issued for a 12 by 24 metal toolbox. And it's like, well, that's kind of a weird thing to say. Actually, the previous photo is going to be better for this.
Oh, okay.
Toolbox, and that's what the permit says, a 12 by 24 metal box to store tools in. And you can see that
Inches of feet.
feet,
Okay.
yeah, yards, no feet, it's feet. 12 by 24, and that is that structure. You can see the Old Portland Road vehicle access point. You can kind of see the brownish roof there. That is the toolbox building. So we know that's been permitted. Some of the other buildings on there are kind of small. There's a house-like structure which has no permitting history, and according to the owner is dilapidated. I always wondered about it driving by over the years, but it was before my time and I hadn't really dug that deep. He says it's worthless because it's falling apart. So they'll need to get a demo permit to get rid of those. Now, on the next page, this is the smaller fenced area on the north side of the site. You can see some of the replaced fencing that'll need site obscurement added. And he happened to add the Connex boxes during the review, so I happen to be able to have a before and after picture with those in there. So that's the area, you know, is a condition that just says, well, this land use approval does not allow partitioning of those buildings. Is that enough, or do you think that's ridiculous to not require the paving? And we're not proposing any pavement anywhere else, just this area. So that's one of the things I scratched my head on a little bit. But it is a fairly simple proposal, at least compared to some of the things that we've seen. I'll talk about the conditions in brief here. So some things we want to happen before the use is fully operational is the screening. I'm asking you to consider whether or not we should pave that smaller area, and then just building permits needed for the new buildings and for demo, as I mentioned. There's a condition in there that's from the code when you route gravel surfaces, is if there's documented evidence of a problem, you can do something about it. In my 15 years here where we've allowed gravel, it's never been a problem, but you just never know. We specifically say that this doesn't allow additional buildings. Additional buildings we want to review, because then maybe it's starting to go into a different direction from just an open storage site, and which we're pretty lenient on the requirements on for an open storage site. Doesn't allow partitioning of the buildings, like I mentioned, doesn't allow mini storage, and doesn't allow grant of unlawful buildings, because you have some of those buildings on there that may have not been permitted. He mentions on his site plan an office building, and there's no building that was permitted as an office, and that would trigger restrooms and a whole other slew of things. I mentioned the water challenge, potentially digging a well if we can make those findings, but that opens a whole thing. We wanted to make sure that was clear in there. It's good to see someone using the site. Hopefully all the property owners along that street segment can kind of work with each other to help thwart some of the crime issues that have been ongoing over the years. But really that kind of sums up my discussion. Questions?
You plan on bringing more Connex in?
He has not stated such. So I don't believe so. And per the plan. They're showing the two that were indicated in the photo. They're not indicating any more. So as far as I know, and as far as we're being told formally via the plan, no.
Then you could bring them in and stack them up and.
Well, and that's what we're saying. If,
Temporary.
They're all temporary, there's
Yeah.
a box.
Yeah.
You can stack them 5 high.
yeah, it becomes a question, are they being stored there or being used as a building? They're being used as a building, and there's some basic foundation stuff, and that's where we would. That would be beyond the scope, at least as condition currently of this approval.
He didn't show in his plan the toolbox. Building.
Oh, it's there. It's there.
Well, there was a box, a shed by the entrance,
That's it
right there.
and then one
It doesn't
farther
really-
in, yes, I know.
Oh, you mean
But
that?
then the big 12 by 24 one, the brown roof. Dark brown roof.
One that's dilapidated.
Was that the house structure?
Yeah,
Okay, I
I'm
thought.
calling it a house. It
I thought we were
looked
talking-
kind of like a house,
Okay,
but that's not the
Brown.
the toolbox building as referenced in the permit.
okay, the actual lighter brown. Okay. I misunderstood which house you're building it there.
You omitted the dilapidated house-like structure,
Okay, I didn't know where that was.
which is somewhat in the middle of the site.
My question would be, kind of the enforcement issue of it, they bring the Connex boxes in and say, we're not gonna use them as offices, and then everything's approved, they go about their business, and then. And the only concern in that would be like restroom facilities and those kind of things that go along with.
Yeah, and that's an issue really for anything, and sometimes that's when we need to be a third eye.
I have a question about the street trees. When people talked about coming in town on Volco Road is. Looks very industrial and. The tree trees, we have part of that to the point. But. Like any of these things that we want in the future, requiring them when we have a development come in is the way to get them a chunk of time at least.
And it is a conditional use permit, and so that gives you some leverage. And in this case, some of the other storage sites along this road, the fence was placed on the property line. In this case, it's actually set back a little bit. They did have, it looked like they had some landscaping requirements as part of the old wrecking yard. I don't know what those were specifically based on, other than maybe the planning commission just thought it was appropriate.
You know, there's one place longer that they put river rock, but no plantings.
It's kind of unfortunate because it's such a major way to get
It's so
downtown
visual.
here and then.
It's so visual.
Ugly.
Where's this in relation to where they put all the wood and people are stopping by there with their
Places down, yeah, that's the closest storage site to the city's rec building. And one of the first ones we approved there 10 years ago, maybe more, you know how time is. And so it's just adding to the series of that, but it's along that stretch closer to Port Ave.
Another question that I didn't look it up. Like, where I worked, but there was a delineation done there, but I think it was considered to be non-jurisdictional.
Yeah, I talk about that in the report. That was in the
I'm not
Renton.
reading there, but it's non-jurisdictional.
Oh, I think I just said it wasn't significant to the city,
It doesn't matter.
which is the main thing for us.
Yeah.
There's no buffer.
Yeah.
It's in the right of way. They're not proposing to use it. It was just, we knew about it because of some of the previous stuff, so we just identified it. Yeah, there's a wetland there. And considering the trees, we did discuss with him those existing ones, that's why, well, are you okay keeping those? I don't know if some were intentionally planted or if they grew wild.
You got the power lines.
Yeah.
Right in where we would maybe want trees.
Yes, yeah,
That's like the last stretch that isn't, a blackberry is not chopped down.
Well, some of it's undeveloped rights of way too,
Okay,
but yes.
yeah, that's what my thing is, just to keep the. If it's rock, that's fine, but it would be nice as you move down the road, that it doesn't look like Junkyard City.
I think it's too bad we lose industrial property, but.
For storage.
Person's a developer, everything else, they're gonna leave it and develop it. In the future, but. It's, we need industrial property, small parcels like this, and to see them going away.
yeah, I know, it makes me think of legislative actions to restrict storage. And who knows how that would work out. That's a separate conversation outside of
It's
this.
just a comment.
It kind of reminds me of the surface parking question on the waterfront, you know. We're gonna have surface parking on the waterfront inevitably with development, but one day that surface parking might turn into a structure, a parking structure when there's enough density to support it. Maybe this will get redeveloped 30 years from now, he's not improving the site with structures.
As I said, it's all.
One day the water
the positive
line will
about it.
extend.
Value goes up, you'll see the value.
Once water is down Old Portland Road
I'm
and
just sorry to see these go because it's not available now, so you get a return now.
yeah.
And a lot of people looked at this property and, nobody bid, until, this gentleman finally bought it.
Just back to the trees a second, is there room between the wires and their fence put in trees? Would it still be in their right of way?
There is area outside the right of way because the fence is set back.
The trees would be on the. When we acquire trees of this, on their property or in the right of way?
Well, in this case, they would be in the right of way. And that's why in the staff report, we talk about, that they would normally be associated with the frontage improvements, which would be a landscape strip.
Yeah.
But that's gonna take redevelopment of the whole road
I
section,
get that.
which, that could be 30 years when that water line's extended.
I don't think that the paving's necessary, if we definitely not required paving. Big giant financial nut to crack.
Do you know what kind of stuff will be stored in?
It depends. His business model that he talked about was, let's say, John Doe, I have a tractor. I want to sell that tractor. So people pay him to store that kind of stuff out there. And there is an employee, so you're not going to someone's home, at least it gives you the opportunity to look at it in a neutral setting.
So it's consignment.
Yeah.
Which would mean you're manning an office probably for some time.
Yeah, so there's that temptation,
The question I always think about this site, and by the way, I got auto parts from it, wasn't written there. But, is it a brownfield site? Is it?
I was wondering that.
Required cleanup? It was an old school wrecking yard, it wasn't.
and a lot of people asked us about that when it was on the market. I don't know if it's an identified site.
It's suspected.
Yeah,
Been a level 1 and level 2, but you wouldn't have that without.
We don't have anything on file because we weren't trying to buy it. Yeah.
suppose if they start rebuilding, then they would have to.
They would have to have that
Yeah,
to be able to build.
I don't know if it was a cash deal, what that circumstance was.
The wrecking yard's pretty nasty.
and this was-
Back in that era.
Yeah, the old school thing, yeah.
90s.
Putting them on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's why it lingered for so long
Probably cleaned itself up.
No water.
Doesn't there?
and no water.
And the price. I know a lot of people talked about the price.
No one's required to develop the materials, both sides with the, I mean, they aren't, but you're not asking for them to, because it's a small project, right? The Hammond and the other one.
Oh, Hamlin, Renton,
Hammond.
and there's a numbered street in there,
So that's,
7.
Where's Rent?
Renton is the one with the wetland. It's on the north side, if I remember right. Yeah, the north side, and on the aerial photo on page 6. The south side, there's kind of an access gravel road that goes to a beautiful property behind this one. People like to dump stuff, and have been doing so for a long time. And then you can see the undeveloped right of way between that and the storage pal. I think that's what it's still called, storage area. That's where that wetland is at.
But you say they have access to the one itself.
Yeah, there is a gate. There's an access gate there.
Will they be improving that access to gravel or something?
It's
What access is not improved?
it's improved for. It's improved as a gravel access.
Okay.
We didn't propose any changes to that.
Okay, I just
We have to have an asphalt apron off the roadway.
They have that along Old Portland Road. So their Old Portland Road access is completely paved.
I know, but you're saying that you're allowing the access on Renton.
It's pre-existing. That is something you could consider. That the first 25 feet or so be paved. Given the diminutive nature of the project, that's not something that we wrote down as a recommendation, but certainly something you can consider. Now, if the Old Portland Road access was gravel, that would definitely be fair game.
Is there a PUD pole on their property?
I think so. Yeah, the PUD said it wasn't energized.
Oh, okay.
We talked to them about it. They figured that conifer would probably be a conflict.
Oh, here.
Yeah, and I mentioned in the report too. We talked to them and figured out that one may be impacted by trimming and energization of that line. But it's good. They want to put in a light that's going to help with some of that crime problem.
Okay, any other questions for staff? We'll go on. The applicant here, presentation,
Not.
the testimony in support of the application. A neutral testimony or opposition. Yeah. Deliberation. No, hearing no further questions from the commission and no further responses from staff, the public record is closed. This matter is returned to the table for deliberations oral decision. Document. It was probably gonna be difficult to have trees there, but the wires, maintenance issue. Like the idea of getting started there, but
Could limit them. The size, their maturity.
That's why I was worried about a variety of a tree that didn't get tall.
cylinder, small. How many trees would they have to put in to be standard?
If you go with a small species tree, which is the most appropriate given the overhead utility, it would be 20 feet input spacing.
Trees. It's not open space, it's not gonna do much with some small.
You can only have
There are
that.
small wide trees.
Have a recommendation on trees?
Sure.
People don't usually use natives for street trees, but like Cafeteria actually would do really well there. Normally people shy away from them in areas of sidewalks because of the fruit. But I think the height would work with those wires there. It'd actually be an opportunity to get a native tree planted in an area that maybe would fit well. As I would, I believe they would.
You think they'd be
You can have quite a bit of.
resistant?
Yeah, they do real well with full sun.
Yeah, max height is 30, which is consistent overhead power.
They
25.
can handle dry conditions. So.
I'd like to see them do something, whether it's trees or something that's promoted, but it's such a main thoroughfare into downtown. So we're
And
adding.
after that other business put in the full deal with sidewalks and trees, and I saw them packing hoses and everything all summer long to keep those trees alive, so it's like, you wanna be consistent. You know, that place on the corner that they put in a sidewalk,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
and even that, well, even Brownies. When Brownies changed hands, they did put out rose bushes and did whatever, and they cleaned it up a little bit. Cause there had never been anything there, so some effort is warranted, I think.
Brownies turned into greenies.
And UPS parking lot.
Well, it's been UPS parking lot for. long as I've been
And the
here.
brownies again. Anybody else have any thoughts or? With that?
I agree with y'all on the need for additional screening. I mean, you know, I'd like to get it there.
Make a motion then?
Make sure it seems like there's some frowny face about the paving. We want to make sure that's covered.
Who's,
I'm fine with keeping it gravel. Or letting it stay gravel.
Yeah, when I was reviewing this, I just had marked that I like the fact that if there was a problem later, they could be required to do something different. Even though that seems to have never happened. A good provision. So I'm okay with gravel, but I would like to see them do something to road frontage. Street. Something.
But with the concern about the bringing in more of the Connex things, is there any way we can put some kind of restriction on that or limitation?
Well, right now we have the condition, this conditional use permit does not allow additional buildings related to the use, regardless of whether or not building permits are required for them or not. 'Cause some of the small ones used for storage only don't require a building permit necessarily. So we have that. Now, the argument that they're being stored there as Connex boxes not being used as buildings. You could potentially have something that just limits the use of Connex boxes altogether. Based on the business model that it talked about, I assume that wouldn't work his business plan.
Yeah, I guess the thing about the no buildings that bothers me, if he says he's gonna have an hourly employee there. To be there throughout the day, it's like. You're gonna call for the BPS flag on. There's not gonna have a building,
Yeah, I think
or they just, that person is gonna go there when.
they go there when there's a need, there's a showing need.
Right.
So there was a height restriction for a building, but it says one level of height, it would be,
Yeah, then
it's it, but if it's sort of
building
stagnant,
height potential and
that's the only thing,
feels pretty massive.
that's the only thing for decreasing the number of connexes that we built into a building.
Well, with the business model, unless he's selling Connexes for somebody else, the likelihood of him bringing them in and stacking is probably pretty unlikely.
So somebody come up with a motion that includes these things we talked about. You try it?
Well, I'm trying to figure out how we want to describe the additional screening.
Well,
The,
could be, additional trees in the portion between the fence and the right of way. Trees or vertical shrubbery with the specific recommendation of cascara.
I make a motion then that we approve. As presented with the exceptions of requiring what's the name of the tree?
Cascara.
Cascara trees 20 foot on center between the fencing and the right of way. And without pavement.
That cover, that cover everything?
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. One more thing to say,
And then motion for signature.
motion for signature,
So moved.
second,
Second.
say aye.
I,
That's all vote. Very good. So this is a recommendation. Of the commission. Is that correct? Recommendation, sorry.
No, this is your decision.
Okay.
Is the script messed up?
Yeah, it's all right.
Get down at 8.
Okay. The final written decision of the planning commission may be appealed to the city council. The notice of decision will be mailed to all persons who testified or submitted comments. And the appeal deadline will be included in the notes. Thank you. Next, we have the architectural review for Gateway at the intersection of First Street and St. Helens Street. St. Helens.
Great, thanks, Dan. So no surprise, another architectural review, it's me. So I'm really excited to present this project. We've got Andrew Nemi from Lower Columbia and Brett also from Lower Columbia here with me to help answer any questions you may have about this. I'm gonna kind of give a brief presentation and overview of the project and how we got to where we're at. And then we'll open it up for questions. So you might remember I pestered you a couple meetings ago and asked for someone to be on a stakeholder committee. Russ Hubbard was selected to be on that group. So what we did was design a gateway feature for the intersection of St. Helens Street and First. And hopefully you've all seen this plan before. But there's obviously construction happening at this intersection and it has been identified as a gateway into our downtown. And so there are special features at this intersection in both street furnishing and also just the intersection itself will be concrete instead of traditional asphalt. There's going to be wayfinding signage, landscape planters with seat walls. There's a lot of features that make you feel that you've arrived to our downtown. You know, it really is the first intersection as you enter. So I don't want to belabor this too much, but it kind of gives context of where we're looking. So this kind of arch right here is the location for this gateway feature. And our stakeholder committee, I think I had in the memo, included members from the museum. Les Waters was on it. We had Brandon Sundin, our city councilor, Councilor Chilton, our council president, Amara, the Main Street director, was also there. Susie Dahl, who serves as the county land development services director, and also is on the Main Street board. And then Russ was on that commission along with staff. So we met 3 times as this group from May to June. And throughout those meetings, we just kept narrowing down our design. And Russ, you were there, so feel free to chime in as we talk about this, but
The process went really well. It's, you were amazed, it took 3 sessions and we already got down to that.
yeah, I think it was, it was an evolution of design for sure. So I forgot, I wanted to show you, so on this plan for the intersection, I think it's really crucial to know the context of the gateway. And so on the CrossFit side, there's this landscape planter. And this is an old version of the plan, but it's gonna not let me scroll. So this part of the planter is a basalt seat wall. I just wanted to show you what that looked like in an elevation profile. So it's got, columns at the ends with a basalt seat wall. And the foundations for the posts of our gateway land inside of those planters. So the proximity to these basalt seat walls is really important. And you'll see when we get into the design why those planters are important. So I just wanted to give some context there. So our first meeting with the stakeholder group, we looked at examples across the country, really. We looked at many gateways. I mean, they're done everywhere, not just in Oregon. We also looked at the asymmetry of this particular intersection. There's a height difference from one side of the intersection to the other. And so we had to consider how that affected the design. And you'll see that in your elevations that were included in your packet too. At that first meeting, we didn't decide if we wanted a traditional arch or not. So we kept open the idea that we might just have a gateway feature that's on one side, or maybe a feature that's on each side that doesn't actually have a connection. So we were open to that early on in the process. We also talked about whether or not the gateway feature would have text. Meaning St. Helens, Riverfront, would this have text on it? And the resounding consensus was yes, it should have text. So we talked about what that should say.
Glad to see the period.
That was a conversation. So ultimately, we landed on St. Helens Riverfront. We wanted to be simple. We talked about Riverfront District, but we wanted it to be, district doesn't mean a lot of things to a lot of people. We also wanted the text to be double-sided. That was important, that if you're leaving, you also see the same text as when you're arriving. And we also, at that first meeting, we talked about traditional materials. We didn't want to go crazy with the materials or the colors, it's in a historic district. And then lastly, we talked about it, we want it to be illuminated. We want this thing to be visible at night. So those were the things we kind of decided at the first meeting, and then moving into the second meeting, we actually got into designs. At that meeting, Brett presented us, I think it was probably 10 different proposals for designs. And during that meeting, we narrowed it down to about 2 or 3, which were then renderized. So I wanted to show you what those 2 or 3 were, because I think the process sort of evolved from that. So one of the renderized versions looked like this, that the committee had agreed, hey, that's in consideration. And then another one, which was not a traditional arch, looked like this. And this component, is born out of, these pilings, 3 pilings grouped together to have sort of this maritime feel. And one of the things we talked about, Brett, I think, had the idea that, when he was flipping between these 2, he was like, why not combine them? And so that's how we ended up with our final rendering, which combines the 2. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. So you have the traditional arch mixed with the 3 pilings as the poles. And here you can see those landscape planters being important, resembling something like the river, having plants below. And let's see what else I wanted to say here. So we kind of merged the top 2 preferred designs into this final design. So just some components. This is 3 columns made of weathering steel. So that's what gives them this warm kind of rusty color. They're tied together with stainless steel cables. So that's what this is. And I will say, you know, the committee didn't talk about color. So that's something I kind of wanted to bring to this group, is that we never looked at color for font, and we never looked at color for the arch itself. So what the text is coming off of. But ultimately, I think the idea that this is a maritime theme resonated with the committee. This felt unique to St. Helens as opposed to just a typical, you know, post and archway that could be in any community. And I think that's kind of the context of how we ended up where we are. I guess I'll open it up to you guys if you wanted to add anything. Did I miss kind of how we got where we are?
No, I think the only thing I was gonna mention was there's different font in the rendering than is in the CAD drawings, and that was. As I was revisiting it in the rendering and looking at the wayfinding, I was like, oh, it's more of a Times Roman in the wayfinding, and so. In the rendering, I used that instead, but that's also something we're open to in addition to discussion about color. Is
Yeah, and you can see those basalt seat walls and the wayfinding that Brett's talking about. They're elsewhere in the city, but there will be some new wayfinding installed here and here that have basalt bases. Something the commission kind of, or the committee on this belabored, was making sure we're not conflicting with the theater's marquee. And I think the rendering really helped to make sure that yes, we're not going to conflict with the marquee.
We put a lot of effort into that. We don't want to undo their work.
Yeah, it's an expensive marquee.
One of the things I think is worth adding. That's what it really was, the trying to keep the structure low maintenance for the city. And one of the features that we discussed that would have been kind of neat, but it would have probably been a maintenance headache, was the idea of, you know, laser cutting those letters into the horizontal member and then backlighting them with an internal light, which would have been a nice effect, but we all kind of realized that that would have probably been a maintenance nightmare from the standpoint of birds nesting and created a lot of other problems. So
How will it be lighted?
Yeah, so Brett just sent this right before the meeting. So we've got some external lighting from the text here. Brett, I don't know if you want to talk about this at all.
well, I mean, the general concept, and this is still a little rough, was, you know, we're planning to spotlight the main pilings from ground level. And then the intent was that there'd be like a small strip of lighting concealed sort of along the bottom edge of the main arch, to sort of just cast that wash light.
Is uplight traditional? I know a lot of lighting is going down now.
There were quite a few concepts when we were looking at them that used uplight, of various.
I just know from an Audubon standpoint, they're getting away from things that are creating
Oh, right.
excess light pollution, and so I just want to
Right.
have that conversation. Cause don't want to install brand new things that don't meet what the current thought process is.
Right, I mean, especially the strip light, you know, it's pretty low intensity, you know, it's enough to really just sort of wash the front of the sign. It's not gonna be, you know, not gonna be casting way out into space. The spotlights, they can be dialed in and shuttered and stuff to kind of contain them to the pilings as much as possible.
I got a sketch for you for a downlight. I'll show it to you later.
Okay.
It's an option that we have LEDs running all the way across instead of that beam you're talking about.
Right.
An open bottom, but do we have planters on both sides? And
Yeah, so I'll pull up the layout
it's
plan.
gonna bleed the steel, so.
Yes.
Catch that.
So, this was originally, there was only a planter on one side. Gosh, this is always like in my way when I zoom in. So originally there was only a planter in front of CrossFit. But because of the gateway and the nature of, the footings. And wanting to kind of have the river feel at the base of those, we've added another one to the other side that is, sort of mirroring it. Slightly different in size, but
So they don't have a very high curve, they're basically ground level planters.
Do your core test yet?
what was that?
You know, how deep you can go?
We don't know exactly how deep we could go, but we put quite a bit of work into. Threading those footings between the existing utilities and.
Yeah, so
Busy up there, yeah.
the elevation shows that really well. Just the proximity to the sewer line along here for our footing, it's just really close. So that was something we had to work within.
No, I was just out of curiosity, I've seen a lot of planted areas in other communities that are more like, I guess you call it a swell or a swale.
Bioswale,
Yeah, that is like designed to dissipate groundwater, and I know that coming down there by Wild Current, that's a pretty, in a heavy rain, that's a lot of water coming down that hill, so I was just wondering if it's that kind of planter or it's completely different.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if this is acting as part of the storm system or not.
This would be different because it's above and your bench is incorporated. Not gonna be like you see in Portland where
They go down,
Yeah, that area there probably.
there's no down to go.
Stormwater very well.
Yeah, just the shallow bedrock, probably 2-3 feet deep.
so you got a panel band there that's high enough where we're gonna get a lot of construction going on. On the south side of the riverfront.
Yeah, what is the clearance, Brett? I think 16 there.
Right, but there's Plymouth Street.
It's big enough for semis and frames and things to get through there.
Wow, really,
It's-
elevation difference, there really is, like Jenny mentioned, from one side of the street to the other, that shows it well, that it's significant.
If they go down some of
Go down, around. So my question would be on the stainless steel cable that doesn't rust, right? So it was meant to be a feature, or why didn't we choose something that would rust along with the post?
It was meant to stand out as in contrast to the Corten.
I've seen them in other places where it's a stainless steel strap or a stainless steel band. I've seen them in other settings exactly like that.
It's gonna look like old school pilings, doesn't have a pacifist bird.
I know. We've actually talked about birds. So it's a real thing that birds would perch and poop. Up
There could be
here.
an osprey nest there.
So I think that's something we're gonna have to think about in the design.
And,
That would look very modern though.
Osprey cover.
will the steel pipe be able to be, I mean, I'm thinking of like some idiot graffitis them or something, they'll be able to be what? Ground off and start rusting again, or it's like a maintenance. kind of
Yeah, well,
thing.
steel's actually pretty forgiving as far as that goes. It's actually one of the downsides of weathering steel like rust. It's actually kind of always scaling off to a degree, so you do have to. Back to that end, you're gonna have some stain and actually some scale that. Little flakes of steel that pile up at the base. So that does, one plus is that you could blast it if you had graffiti. With better success than you would with some other materials.
So is that? It's kind of reminiscent of gold leaf lettering across that, is that what you? Envisioned
I
or?
mean, that was one of the ideas. It's one of those, you present it so people have something to respond to.
What are your thoughts on the background being, behind it, like black or?
Well,
White or?
right, this was, like a powder coated, off-white or something. Again, we were sort of wanting to open it up to discussion about.
The gold looks funny to me.
Yeah, that's actually where I'd like the conversation to go, is figuring out a recommended
The gold
color.
looks really funny to me.
Yeah, I think it would look great. if
I'm
it
just
was black.
concerned,
I
I'm
mean,
concerned about the
No, I
sunlight.
mean, I'd go with the gold leaf, but when it's sitting on.
Like the
it, that was
glare?
painted darker.
Glare, Charlie, or what do you mean by the sunlight?
Yeah, I'm concerned about the glare with the white background and the gold lettering like that.
Yeah, I'm not
I mean,
fan of the
It gets
gold
pretty
lettering.
bright.
I think the background should be the blue you use in your wayfinding color.
Kind of a teal, is that kind of a teal color?
Yeah, it just might be too much of a good thing.
It's hard to read those signs.
Well, and I will say,
A royal or just more darker than that, but then the letters would stand out.
yeah,
Another blue could complement those wayfinding signs though, and obviously navy blues are very nautical looking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the navy and white kind of camp of.
See, I love
Make
it.
it not agree.
Then
Obviously.
the gold would go against that just fine, or a lighter colored letter.
Maybe a little
yeah,
gold is
there is gold in the wayfinding on these,
Oh, yeah, that was one of those. I forgot that was part of my reasoning for where I.
yeah, I
pulled
don't think
that
the
from.
text is gold, I think it's just these, yeah.
Text is white on this. Yeah.
Yeah, next on the wayfinding signs is just white, but
background would be black and the lettering be blue.
I do.
You don't want my suggestions on color because of the Clemson fan, I'd say orange and purple.
Yeah, it's also hard to get an entire commission to agree on color schemes.
If you think of that like a quarter board on the back of a yacht, it'd be like navy blue with gold lettering.
I think navy is gonna contrast well with the gold.
I think it's worth getting a little more input on the cable itself too. I personally feel like the stainless is a little blingy.
I don't, yeah, that's one thing I'm not.
I think it's gonna tone down,
You do,
but also you don't need a cable that, you mean, you're showing a cable to be about like that big. I think maybe if you take 3 strands and you weave them together and then take it on up, they're gonna have texture that way. And as you know, the stainless will tarnish, it won't be bright for
Yeah.
Work chains.
The guidelines talk about bright unfinished metal, you know, but you know, the stainless is finished. You just wouldn't want it to be reflective.
The other option I was thinking of would be galvanized, which is just a little, it'd be just a little bit of a tamed down version of the. I know the gate had a little bit more of that oxidized look like you're talking about with the stainless.
cheaper.
Rust a little bit later.
Galvanized is a good suggestion. There's a lot of galvanized railing in our park system too, with the handrails along stairs and things like that.
You give the same effect.
Yeah,
I love the design, I think it's beautiful. It needs a little fine tuning.
I would consider the cables, chains, ropes, whatever they are at the lower levels. Cause we see people climb over a lot of things.
so raise these maybe.
You only get so high.
yeah, I mean, I tried to keep them separated enough that someone really couldn't climb from one to the other. I mean, these things are 22 feet tall or something, so I mean, you're talking about 12 feet or something between them.
There will be kids trying to climb.
But the one thing is, it's in an area that's visible from all sides, so it's a little bit. You know, it's not like down on the dock someplace where people be screwing around in the dark.
That's where you plant the roses.
Let's electrify the cables.
It's really crime prevention by design, thorny plants.
I really like the design. I think galvanized cable might be a better choice because it will, it'll be dull when it goes on there and it might weather
You do a little bit.
concurrently with the steel. As far as the signage is concerned, a darker arch with a lighter font, not gold necessarily. I'm kind of near on the color for the font, but a darker arch. I even thought about black.
Yeah, a lot of our street furnishing is black, benches, the basalt here. Yeah,
Just disappear the black there in the night, but
And one consideration, like Jenny mentioned, it is gonna inevitably get bird poop on it, so I think the darker colors would show that better.
Bird poop.
Yeah.
sir, better.
the gold lettering with white streaks on it, would be nice.
Bird guano was a feature of typical pinelands.
I'll show you my design, it's poop proof.
You know, I double dual purpose bird
A
roofing.
lot of hours on this thing, I just got. I came home and after our meeting, I go, I gotta figure this bird thing out, so they don't, so.
Does your design include a kind of a rim at the top that you get lighting from and also
Exactly.
be a bird feeder shield?
Yeah, well, they can stand on top. I mean, you're not gonna keep them from that. But it's, instead of a solid beam, it's gonna create the looks of a beam, but it's gonna curl around and then have recessed lights.
The letters from the bird.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, concept.
Good idea.
Generally positive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think it looks really good that way.
Thanks, guys.
Very, very St. Helens.
Yeah.
Very riverfront.
I see the little notes on here that the riverfront district should not have murals. There's a notation in here about not.
Oh,
murals.
on the signage?
Yeah, thought that was interesting. I saw the little checks on the sign, I was like. They gonna follow it?
Could be brought up, is this going to be allowed to have banners also for the broad?
No,
Yeah, there isn't a plan for them now. And there is a plan for banners on Strand and Cowlitz. There's gonna be a traffic bar that closes, so we can close the street down.
Okay, but not this structure,
Yeah, we're not designing it to support banners.
right, okay.
We're not gonna put eyelets.
I don't think it needs to stand.
I can't tell you what happens beyond its installation. But
The temptation will be there.
it's not part of the plan. And I don't think it should be.
I don't think so either. There's other places to do it, but they can stand it by itself.
it's a good reason for the.
So no,
Maybe it's
no
low.
pilots put in for people to strap things up to.
Yeah, the PUD is also the one that installs banners at the entrance in Holton. So I don't know who would install these banners, you know.
You get the PUD and Comcast did some, because some of the poles are Comcast. I helped,
You mean the lights, yeah.
no, those little ones that, Al and Kanika, their leadership group did.
Yeah, he's talking like seasonal, like fair and rodeo,
Oh, yeah,
like parade, Kiwanis parade.
the same spot up there on 21st.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the time frame for this it falls into?
Same as the streets and utilities project, yeah, so that's why we want the same people to install it that are doing the construction out there.
And we'll go out for bid.
I don't think we need to just do it publicly because it's part of the project. MEI has already bid on the project.
I think it should be.
Part of it or bid.
I think it should be a separate item to bid there.
Oh, to fabricate it?
Fabricate it and install it, yeah.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about fabrication process. I know early on, the council's desire was to utilize local, like, Pacific Stainless. But, yeah,
Do you think it's a specialty enough item that someone should be more specialized in this kind of thing? Is that what your thought process is?
Yeah. In these, you're giving the job to pipe layers,
for install,
even install. Install is a very important part of any
yeah.
part.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to coordinate with Public Works. It's really what it comes down to.
We just wanna make sure that people know what they're doing, because I know when stuff gets up in the air like that, remember all the art banners and those things flying around and all that stuff. Just wanna make sure we know what we're doing before it's in the air.
You don't want another flying guillotine?
I wasn't gonna use that word.
And powder coating steel of that size is a specialty trade for sure.
But it's like you do go to all this effort, you wanna do it right. And you wanna make sure that it's what we signed up for. Because a lot of times you look at a picture and then what shows up is like,
Oh, you mean like volcanoes?
I wasn't gonna say that word either.
That's why I'm here.
It's got a powder coating furnace. I don't know how big it is though.
So.
So I think we need a motion that this complies.
Okay, that's right, it's your architectural standards. That's right.
I move that the proposed plan complies with our standards.
Oh,
What does that mean complies to what?
The architectural standards, the architectural guidelines, that's what this whole thing, I didn't really do a good job at the beginning of this, but. The reason it's before you is for compliance. with the
Right.
standard.
Should we mention colors?
Yeah, so I wrote, entertaining a darker option, just to see how that looks in contrast. And this is just a recommendation, so if we go down that path and we're like, this is not gonna work. You know, I'll come back to you guys just as an FYI and say, hey, this is why we didn't do it, but, I do think it would be nice to see how that looks. with a
And did you
darker
guys look at silver as well as gold
For the font,
for the letters? Yeah.
I don't know that silver was brought up until you just said it.
Oh, well, I just see the silver on the stainless steel and the other stuff, so I'm like, I just. Thought about, you know, if you're gonna think about navy with, you think about navy and chrome, navy and silver. It's
Yeah.
also an option if you want something to look more watery. It's a silver thing, not a
We want it
gold.
to look historic.
What?
We want it to look historic.
Yeah, I'm not a big. She wanted input, so I was like, if you're gonna change it, the background, if the navy or the black, if silver is a better pop for the color.
Sure.
You know, you gotta look at it, is navy background more important or is gold letters? It's like, look at it both ways and see what options there are.
The gold is more historic looking.
I do, I mean, if you look at the original sign that's part of the memorandum, it was. It looked to me like it was probably black lettering with a white sign, but I mean, I love the fact, I was really hoping that you'd look at this picture and take that into account, so.
I threw it in there just for you,
I
Jennifer.
appreciate it.
Looks very similar,
Yeah, I
doesn't
was
it?
really hoping for that, so I'm pleased with that. I just don't think the light color fits within the historic district.
So, but the high contrast is definitely.
Yeah.
The high contrast.
That's our priority too, and I think consistency with these wayfinding, you know, I think that's why the gold.
So it's super visible on the, in the daytime as well as at night, so you have to look at what that color is.
Put gold caps on the trim.
Oh, up here,
Like bullets.
I will tell you on the gold leaf letters on my building, I get more comments on that probably than anything on the facade of the building.
she has the real estate across the street, if you're,
Oh, okay.
It's a classy look, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you care whether or not they remain flat topped or if they have a cone feature or something like that?
On the lettering,
No, the pylon.
Caps.
there comes. I think you gotta prevent birds from doing whatever you can, so you open.
Leave them open, hollow,
Full light on it, but they're not gonna like it. Won't stay there very long. Hopefully they're turned the right way so they'll cook down.
have you guys considered that, hollow?
I was thinking about it, the concern was them slowly filling up with crap.
Right.
I'll do it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you could take it a step further and actually grind a sharp edge on it even, I mean, it's not of a danger.
Everything in big cities that's like that up high has pokey things on it.
You can flatten
Yeah,
cap
but those bird things, yeah, but then it's gonna be like, yeah, they got a problem with birds. I mean, sure, yeah, put an edge on it.
edge on it.
Yeah, they're not gonna like that.
Attractive for birds.
We're gonna land on the arch anyways.
I think it looks more historic being without caps.
Yeah, I agree, I think that caps look more modern and,
Yeah, like appropriate. I was just talking.
no, it's plastic, so it's tough to pull it off, not, you know, looking.
Rugged steel or something, then.
Lanes.
Or spotlights shooting up in space.
John has mentioned multiple times wanting a fountain feature, so
Oh, my word.
Yes. Squirting to.
Jacob's volcano into this.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, I'm not claiming ownership of the volcano.
It's like Alane's new blue light, or something when he shows it across the room, they have this blue light shooting up into the sky.
There's that laser light show, like, cool.
Yeah, it's really historic.
Okay, we didn't get to our.
Well, that's right.
Jason.
We diverted.
Yeah. I move that we. Put this forward as meeting the architectural standards. Improved
As discussed.
as discussed.
Second.
All in favor?
I.
Yeah, I did before.
That's cool.
I want to say Breach is we're proud to be part of this, you know, it's a fun project and commissioner, so. It's really enjoyable.
Need to be part of a oral landmark.
Just gotta take it to the finish line.
Now we've done that, can I ask a stupid question?
Sure.
Was there any thought about having the arch on the first part of the intersection?
Uh,
The north side.
Yeah.
I think there's other considerations there.
The first meeting, I thought it was on that side. And then this is the better,
Yeah, so one of the problems is, well, now all the vaults in the world are going over here. First of all the vaults, so there's like 6 communication. That you don't even, like Comcast, LS Networks, Fat Beam, there's just a ton of communications that are undergrounding in this. You know, we're undergrounding the utilities and those vaults all need to go somewhere. So they're all probably gonna go in here. Some of them are underground, some of them are above ground, I believe. I think majority of them are at grade with the sidewalk. But anyways, there's also this driveway that's a conflict
Okay,
into this area.
into the pot shop.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I don't, to answer your question, you know,
Hey, I'm not pushing one way, I just thought about it.
yeah,
Like
I
I
honestly don't think.
think of the gateway coming in, turn down onto St. Helens Street to go to River Street. On the riverfront, but
Yeah, you'd miss it if you were coming really from Portland, if you.
If you come in this way,
that's true too. If
Yeah.
it came down that way, that's true.
But you see it when you're leaving either way,
yeah,
with it visible from one side, maybe you see it driving, or maybe you see it walking.
Yeah, coming
I
in.
just went up over the hill and came out.
Stay out of my neighborhood.
not a stupid. I don't think that's a stupid question, but we can't change it now, that's for sure.
I mentioned you're gonna have trouble with some boats leaving the basin and coming up, making that right hand turn. That's a curb or is that a,
The mountable edge,
This is a curb.
they're gonna bounce over that quite a bit.
Top.
Northwest corner.
west.
All right,
I
thank
guess-
you.
I guess you're going here now. So, do you have any questions about the planners? Like a sensitive lands permit.
Oh, for the culvert. Actually, we can take it offline, but, that sensitive lands permit for the culvert, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Um,
Permitted. Okay. Any other things?
Thank y'all.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Talk about planning department activity report. June, or-
Yeah, I did review it. I actually reviewed it beforehand, remembering, oh yeah, the main things I wanted to talk about is 3115 is done, including all the post stuff. I had to help the police a little bit with some of the notices they're required to post and stuff like that. That's finally behind us.
Give a map of where they can light.
Yeah, we did create a new map. It's been distributed to some people. I don't think we provided it to you, but it was an updated one, because the other ones were meant for discussion, here, there.
Got a final one now and.
Mhm.
Did the public have that?
Yeah, I sent it to Crystal. I wasn't sure if she wanted to post it. The police have it, it exists. Whether or not we put it on the website. That's a good question.
Everybody's on the same page, everyone, you know what happens.
Yeah.
There's a map for where they can rest, not just a map for saying where they can.
Yeah, there's a map of the exclusion areas.
Okay, so it's not a place to rest. Where-
And then another thing, in the report, and this is something that comes up periodically. And so it's just, I thought it was, he was talking about it again. So for years, we've been talking about, the lawsuits in the Puget Sound area. And how floodplain development, people argue, which has been based on mitigating loss, and only that, how it potentially facilitates environmental degradation, impacts certain threatened species. And so there's this biological opinion, all that stuff that's been going on for several years. What it means to us in Oregon is we will have a new round of flood code amendments. And it will include environmental considerations. Exactly how that transpired, I don't know. There's a little bit of detail in the memo about that. It was something that they proposed to have done years ago, but federal government is pretty slow. How quick that happens, I don't know, but it was another little blip of news, so I put that in the report. Did you have anything of interest?
Yeah, so I don't know how many of you read my report, but I've been semi-working with the engineering department on a TGM grant. So TGM grants are what funded our original transportation systems plan, the corridor master plan from 2015, and then the riverfront connector plan from 2019. And now engineering would like to update our TSP with another TGM grant. And as part of the application, the engineering department asked for a letter of support from you all. So I printed one for everyone, but I'm gonna ask for your signature, Dan. And it still has you as the vice chair, because I wasn't sure what would happen.
It's fine.
But you all, if we get this, would be involved in the update of our TSP. It would come before you probably at a couple key points. So, it's from 2011, our original one, and typically they get updated every 15 years. 20 if we're really slow. And it's time.
Well, we've had a lot of development in the last 8 years.
And that's kind of what the letter talks about too, is the amount of housing that's built, higher density housing on key corridors. And having the corridor plan is one thing, the riverfront connector plan is another. But combining all of these things into one cohesive transportation systems plan just makes our lives easier as we're trying to implement it.
So do we need just a motion for Dan to sign this? Or do
That's
we
probably
depend on it?
appropriate, yeah, because he's gonna sign on behalf of the commission, so that feels appropriate.
Make a motion that Dan sign?
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
So, thanks for that question. All these different things you talked about. Would this integrate these plans that mean they would also be relooked at like the trails plan?
Yeah, it's a good question, like what would,
What do you mean integrate the modifying them?
yeah, like would one trump another? Is that kind of your question?
Well, necessarily, but are now they're all open for review.
Is this new facts and evidence?
Well, I think some things have been implemented, right? The Parks and Trails plan had trails, we've actually developed some of them.
Yeah.
And the same for the corridor plan, actually the corridor plan, probably nothing, but the riverfront connector plan, certainly we've implemented in many ways.
Yeah, it's a good question because the corridor plan and riverfront plan, those are refinement plans of the transportation systems plan. So how many of those details are incorporated? We haven't gone through this cycle anew before, and so ask us in a couple of years, we'll be able to answer it pretty well. I think that's one of the mysteries is we have all this planning work Is it gonna reference that or is it gonna incorporate it? Because it's a general overall plan. You know, you can't necessarily put everything but the kitchen sink in there, so it'll be interesting.
We have specifically some development plans that came after these big subdivision plans that don't have any trail component to it, for instance. But maybe we want to do some modifications of the Parks and Trails plan.
Yeah,
Review the plans.
I think the trails component would look at what was proposed and add.
Yeah,
And if there was a removal of a project, there would be good reason. You know,
Yeah,
maybe it's
yeah.
not feasible.
but like any of these things, we're looking at all these developments and the future developments, proposed developments, making sure they all fit that now.
Yeah.
And the whole transportation in keeping with the transportation plan.
So many things have changed since 2011. It's insane in the community.
I know Mohammed, what drives him nuts is the old project list. That's one of his motivations is to have a new project list. The one that is just old and.
Oh, it comes out of the TSB.
And the cost estimates for those projects, I mean, from
Oh, yeah.
2011, can you imagine the difference? When you go to write a grant, you know, you're just having to escalate on contingent, you know, and it's just. It makes our lives a lot easier to have updated plans that all talk to each other.
At least we'll know how much even more expensive the intersection improvements to Gable US 30 will be.
Yeah.
That's one we have looked at a couple
We
of
buy
times.
off the bank.
So hopefully we get the TGM grant. We'll find out in September. So.
Do you know when the sidewalks will be done on Columbia Boulevard that meet Gable?
Yeah, they're trying for the end of the school year, or the start of the school year, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just curious, I'm so impressed by how much better the safe routes to school are with the additional crossings there for the high schoolers. The congestion at bus time and at lunchtime is moving so much better with those crosswalks. And I think people actually feel safe.
Let me back up and say, I think the contract says November. They're like
So
really,
before winter,
yes,
because the best weather for building is in that fall.
yeah, there's a water work window that's now
Right.
live.
Yeah, it'd just be nice before the winter comes to have those kids be safe, because that particular stretch of Columbia is so narrow.
No, I walked it today, with photos of the trees, so.
I was like, what are you doing over there? You don't live over there.
Any applicants for the,
Zero.
and does the city have an alternative plan for that money if they're doing this?
I mean, I was just talking about the city hall windows, they need to be repainted, the wood windows on the ground floor.
And what's the grant for?
It's the CLG program,
And how much is the money?
17,000. And it's a 1-to-1 match. And applications close July 24th or 5th. I can't remember the date. They just look online, but they close in a couple weeks, and I've heard from you and Les Waters.
Well, I was curious, because I know we've used that money before, because when they cleaned the bricks and stuff, the
Yep.
rocks on the building. And just thinking about what Brady talked about, I know we have a intergovernment agreement out here for the plaza. Maybe there is something that can be done out there to improve the surface, or, because I know that right now the budget is tapped, but that park all year long takes such a beating.
So
And there's no money in the county to do it.
it's for historic buildings.
Oh, so not historic, because that is a historic landmark,
It
but it
is,
is not a building.
locally, it is a historic landmark.
Oh, okay, so it's not, I thought it, when I read something, it was linked with the courthouse as one unit.
I think that's what.
Yeah, I mean, it was the architect designed it in conjunction with the courthouse.
They're not wrong.
Okay.
But I don't think the CLG program would fund work on a plaza as opposed to the courthouse itself.
Right, it's a good question, because it's still probably considered a nationally recognized resource.
Well, I just wondered, because I know they've had electrical problems out there, I know they've had other issues out there, so if there's something that could be done. That could, further the investment in that area, I don't know.
I think if it was receptive to non-building projects, my initial thought was, are you restoring something, or are you adding something that would be nice to have? That's not necessarily restoring something historic.
Is the electrical, that's not historic. Cause there
No.
wasn't originally lighting down here.
And it was pretty basic when it was, I mean,
Well, there was a fountain there.
And there's
Brown's water feature.
equal number of trees on each side.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the trees should get replanted for sure. the
I
ones
think
that
it was
died.
actually hedges at the beginning. The oldest picture I saw showed a wedding at this church. It was just hedge. But anyways,
it's a good idea. Yeah,
I just thought of other things. I mean, fixing the windows is a great idea, but I just thought that's very visible. That it would affect a lot of people.
oh, sure.
And as you're doing this gateway project, and doing all this Main Street work and undergrounding the stuff, I thought if there's any improvements that could go to rather than see the money go away.
Yeah, the plaza is called out in the urban renewal plan as a improvement project.
Yeah, I just didn't know, and I don't know enough about what's there and stuff, but I thought but rather than let the money go, that would.
We won't let the money go. We'll spend it.
Right, but I mean, it's a lot of times that money gets spent on like. The old windows or Mount Baker or something else that it's like. If there's something in the book that would be showy, people would get a lot of value out of, that would qualify, that'd be cool.
Well, you all get to weigh in on what project gets selected, so we can talk about alternatives that would be eligible. If no one applies, that might be a good use of our time. You are the Historic Landmarks Commission as your other hat. So yeah, I think that's something we can talk about.
Yeah,
It used to be for a thing, like, City of Portland's Riverfront Park, they have events there. Just trash the lawn and they know they restored, they put in sand, and they're prepared for that. And they do what needs to be done to get it back wherever it needs to be. We don't have the maintenance people to do that here, but could that money go towards that work, that they're refreshing and whatever it takes to make it work better.
they do that at Willamette Park too. They put in those pavers or whatever that have the holes in it, that grass grows through.
Yeah.
So it looks like lawn, but you can drive on it.
I think as it relates to this conversation and what Brady's been talking about. If you look at those old photos, there was a concrete walkway that was like a crucifix,
Yeah,
and that's lost now.
yeah.
If you had that. One thing I've seen having a window here is Halloween Town, people with disabilities and wheelchairs.
Have no access.
It's horrible.
Right.
So if you implemented the crucifix and like in the mid block where that enters, that's where you put your accessibility entrance. So you're restoring the crucifix,
And you're improving access
you're
for all.
improving accessibility. Now you have more paved area to help with the ground issue, and you're eliminating the sinuous thing, which really, in my view, is completely inappropriate given how it was originally designed.
Correct.
So you're restoring what was there and improving.
I know, well, I mean, it's whatever you wanna call it, that's what it looks like. That's,
The what?
oh, he's making fun of me for.
Crosswalk.
Well, I'm being somewhat serious, I guess.
Well, I mean, a lot
The
of things,
crosswalk.
there's a lot of religious references in early Oregon history. That's everywhere.
Yeah, the X.
There was a lot of stuff in Oregon history that
Yeah.
we're not gonna bring
But I
back.
mean, you could, if a person really wanted to, because some of those blocks that were put there could be inlaid into that cross piece, and I don't know why they didn't do it that way. But I mean, it was supposed to represent the Oregon Trail, but it was never designed to be permanent. It was part of that anniversary of Lewis and Clark.
It could be transferred to some other part of the.
Yeah.
Park or something.
Anyways, that's just spending throughout money, so we'll throw you away to spend it.
Yeah, I think those are all good ideas. If we don't get applicants, we have backups.
Yeah, I would have loved to apply, but this is not the year.
You're a little bit over the barrel.
So do you have, you can talk about the architectural standards for proactive items?
Starting to dive into, my schedule's starting to allow me to dive into the research of it. I've been especially looking at McMinnville and Wilsonville and then Redwood City in California and Alameda County in California. So those are all interesting points of view on architectural design. Learning about human scale design and compatibility and massing and all those terms that I've not experienced before, because I originally approached this on kind of a historical preservation thing, and it's obviously not just that. So, I also wanted to, the document I found that's from the National Association of Home Builders to see what they're taking. To get all sides of it, so I think. Probably by next month, Jenny and I will be able to meet and, I was gonna ask, when is the next joint meeting? Would we want to be ready for that?
Oh,
We missed July, because it was July.
yeah,
No,
more or less 3 months from now, yeah, more or less.
I feel like
October.
that might
I
be.
think so.
Might be on.
Let's see if I can get information from Charles.
Oh, September,
September.
mid-September.
One thing I was curious about in your report was, or memorandum was, where do I find the updated report on from 2017?
I have it.
Oh, yeah, we can just give that to you.
Yeah, do you want me to just, do you want a print copy? Or do you
You
wanna?
can email it to me or whatever. I just
Okay, I'll send that to you. You know why we didn't do anything with that, right? So it turned more properties to non-contributing.
read that. This whole design thing is. Trying to find the reason that it's has any longevity or is valid because of the. Enforcement side of it, you know, it's like the Shin House I was mentioning is a landmark and it has vinyl siding on it that never should have had. And, so all these design standards, we implement them at permitting and then whatever happens with them. And what's the point, I guess, I'm struggling with a little bit. I mean, it's position on the lot and all those different things and not big massive roofs and, but once you get past that initial build. When there isn't a lot of infill lots left, so really, we're looking at. Demolishing old houses and putting up big mansions or.
Right. Or building what they think is a shed and it turns into an addition.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, that's like 2.5 stories tall. It's like, is that a sniper den over there?
Always have a long covered walkway to it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, but rules are imperfect and when you're in government, you see it and that's.
And then how will cluster housing fall into all this?
Well, it would, that's a good question, so. There's duplexes. And single family dwellings. And that's a category. And of course, we said, okay, well, in addition to duplexes, there can be 2 detached structures in the same lot. And there's specific stuff about don't be too mean to those, but also we can't be too mean to middle housing. Right now, cottage clusters, if we modified it our code so that they could be detached, would just be 3 or more units on a property. And so it would just be the multi-dwelling standards that would apply if we just change that definition. So if you still glazing requirements, trim requirements, stuff like that, it would still apply. But there could be a difference on whether or not it's 2 or 3 or more. If you went with the do it by housing type, it's one of the things we talked about last time.
I just lost my train of thought. What was I gonna say? I don't know.
But one thing I did, because you asked a couple times as we've talked about this, you know, well, should we have a historic preservation proactive item? And the reason I grouped it all together at first was because the concern the commission had was or the objective was to how to influence the appearance of buildings. And so I just kind of grouped that to everything, which can be historic preservation, but it can be other things as well, just to help tease things out and help you kind of, well, maybe we should go this route, or maybe we should go that just in prioritizing.
I know even as far as the preservation side of things, properties that maybe no longer are contributing or qualify anymore. If you look at the when Ann Fulton helped with the 1984 application, and some of them, she makes recommendations like if you took out these aluminum windows and opened the porch again, it would become contributing again. So I think there's a component of that part that we could encourage people to
You can find some funding or something.
care about that, yeah.
Well, I mean, that one guy, and I think he was part of the crew with OPD that did this old house, and he came and talked to us at the Main Street thing. And talked about doing workshops on how to restore your windows and how to do this, and how to make your old house last forever. And he talked about how all the disposable vinyl building supplies is what's filling up landfills now. It's like, you don't need vinyl windows, you take care of the windows you have. So it was that kind of thing, is that message to people that having an old house is not bad. But we're in a different place now with the land of DIY and HGTV. Hopefully people know more. Hopefully.
Baby steps, I guess.
Is there any more, Jen?
No, I don't.
And, can you speak to Brady's conversation about non-conforming uses in, commercial areas?
Did you see that today?
He did, after he talked about the plaza, he
You
talked
did not
about,
use the term non-conforming use.
what is it?
The
Came
long
up with
run
the
business
vacant-
for the
There's
space.
a reference to that board.
Oh. Yeah.
Non-conforming use is a very different thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you call what they
Yeah,
do there.
Yeah,
But I mean, we had people when when business was really tough, we had people living in storefronts. A couple different places, and we never did anything with it. It kind of eventually fixed itself.
That was thrown out as a proactive item when we were first talking about being proactive.
Because there was 3 different places where I knew where people were living in a storefront.
under the skies of urban renewal. I don't even.
Well, I know, sorry,
Yeah.
Rachel Berry, in her work with the Main Street program. She said that the Main Street program has talked about that and has talked about initiating it. Several months ago, maybe in the winter, she sent me an example from the city of Astoria, where they have rules that basically, I'll do something or we're gonna slap you. Hasn't gone beyond that. But I don't know, I haven't heard anything recently from the Main Street group on their effort with it. If it fizzled, if they're too busy with that, I just don't know, but it has come up with them. And we have at least that one Astoria example.
Right. Yeah, because I wasn't sure what that, because you and I had talked about that a long time ago about how do we, force people to kind of do something or move on. And I know that's an accessibility issue. Because the individual that lives there can no longer access, I don't think they can access their home anymore, and that's why they're living there. So,
That's like a lot of times I hear on the weekend, they'll clean my storefront or different things, and you see people kind of going from that are down here. I mean, it's kind of a ghost town, but they'll go door to door and then nothing's open for them to
keep it moving.
keep them down here. So it sure would be nice.
And just- It'd be nice for everybody to have it be more visible.
But the government should not fine people if they keep their building in decent repair and it's not being used to be using the way they want. I don't think the government should tell you you have to do something else. There should be an incentive.
Yes, an incentive, conversely, an incentive.
Commercial incentive to say, hey, we'd like to see you join in the rest of the street. So here's some money, go find some money. Here's the money lady right there.
Different approaches.
It's the carrot and the stick.
Yeah.
The stick is quicker.
On that old white subject, the Gracie's Annex building.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
That being a priority to condemn and remove is high, very high now. Because our public works director is concerned that the construction vibrations will do enough to.
Property owners should be happy about that.
It should be.
List is gonna go even.
What did they want it to go in?
Well, people in the historic preservation, there's a thing called demolition by neglect, and they open up the building so much that.
That falls in.
Boeing,
Just,
yeah.
So there is movement for that building now.
But the owner of the property,
They won't pay for it. The city's not paying for the demolition of their building.
so he's working with you now. I know there was quite a,
They were open to demolition, yeah. That's what the public works director said.
Yeah, we haven't had the conversations.
We're going to know, haven't, make sure you had an opportunity to, for whatever subject matter you want.
No, I just enjoy having listened to you guys and no arguing, and it's fantastic. Honestly. I want you guys to be able to, I just want you guys to be able to do what you want to do and you know, bring out your opinions and I think you're doing a wonderful job.
So your predecessors wanted to have this time for your information, I actually have something to bring to us, or.
If council's getting complaints, or if you guys are working on something.
So I just want you to know that you can talk anytime.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't quite sure about that, to be honest with you. No, I haven't heard any complaints. I haven't heard anything. Everything I've seen is positive,
Yeah,
especially.
not, you know, when I was sat in that seat, people complained about street safety. And complained about housing developments and street lights and that kind of stuff. And so sometimes when people want a variance, it's important for us to know. That, oh, over there in that neighborhood, there's already lots of moms coming in saying their cat got hit or whatever.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything like that.
So that's like, so then before we go, sure, you don't have to improve anything. But, yeah,
I would certainly bring it up if I heard something that you guys need to address.
that's perfect.
So I want to talk about the latest gripes about the Gable Road apartments.
Are there gripes?
Well, depend, yes.
Pretty regularly, yeah, this is fun, guys.
I'm just concerned about the traffic.
I'm concerned about this topic. I support some different families in that building and they're quite happy and they're not criminals. And so they have housing and they're not living in their car and that's all fine by me.
They're crossing across with no crosswalk too.
Yeah,
That's a danger.
wasn't what 1,000, I mean, it was 239 units, whatever it is,
that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people.
in the community.
3 buildings open, there's already,
There's more than 3 buildings open, isn't there?
back when I was still there, it was already 20 calls to the cops.
And where do the residents come from?
Left it.
I've heard out of state, they're
What is that?
brought in from out of state, or they're not necessarily serving local people, you know?
That's people coming out of it.
I have heard from certain officers that are not with the city, that they've pulled over multiple people and they all have Portland addresses, that they moved out here from Portland, which I think was, you know, it's a NOAA property, so it's
Northwest Housing Authority.
so that doesn't surprise me. I didn't necessarily think that we needed such a large complex. But I guess given the fact that they could build it and did build it, then, you know, it's what we got and what we have to deal with.
Yeah, the plus side is that what I'm seeing from the families I'm supporting over there is they're doing the school lunch, summer school lunches on site. Food bank access is on site, they have mental health is over there on site. And so there's a lot of services, and once the construction gets out of the way, I think things will start. Because it's like you take all these people who have never lived by each other. And put them together, and the kids are climbing in and out of dumpsters, and there's all kinds of stuff happening. But all the moms are like grabbing them by the neck and reporting them, and things are getting better, but it's like. It's a lot of people to be squished into a small space really quickly.
And I think it'll take time to smooth out.
I have adjourned the meeting without the council having something to say. They had something to say and they, you know, we got a little left. I know them.
You noticed that.
You didn't get ignored.
No, not that I go here.
Forgot about that.
All right, well, let's adjourn to adjourn.